Hello and welcome to my November 2011 video blog on the Milwaukee Roads Ulitic, Indiana branch. This month's subject will be boxcars, specifically some of the Milwaukee Road roadside ones. We'll be discussing Intermountains and exact rails and some of the difference between the two. I'll also share some tips about weathering with these specific cars. Here are all 5 cars. I've obtained them over the past year or so. As I'm swiveling around here, the first 3 cars you see here are all the Intermountains. And here is one of the good old Athearn MDC ready to roll cars, which is from the old MDC tooling. And then back over here, we've got the 2 exact rails. I got things set up so you can also see the undersides as well. As comparing the cars, the first thing you notice, if you look at the rows, oops, wrong way here on the zoom, there we go. So you notice the rows. You look at the Athearn car here, then look at the Intermountain car. There's really no comparison at all. There's no comparison. Both Intermountain and Exact-Rail did this really well. From the panels, even to where the sides meet the roof line. Everything is done just really well. It looks very much like a lot of the photographs of these cars. Just one of those little things that makes a big difference. On the Intermountains especially, I like the metal roof walk. I like how thin it is, and I like it's very much like a lot of the prototypical views from the roof of this car I've seen in photographs. Underneath, both Exact-Rail and Intermountain have done very well with this. Nice set of brake rigging and hardware, the pipings, the rods, the levers, triple valves, air reservoirs, you name it. That was the Intermountain. Here is the Exact-Rail car. As you can tell, things are done pretty well here. Nice underframes, undersides, everything very crisp. Even on the ends of these cars, we have the small lumber door also put on. However, not everything is as perfect. The Intermountain cars especially have incorrect ends. Here, get my pointer and I'll show you. See right here, the ends are not really prototypical. I cannot remember the types. I can tell from photographs. If you look over at the Exact-Rail car, hopefully you won't get too dizzy with me doing this, there is a difference. And this is more prototypical. Big congrats to Exact-Rail. Also on the Intermountain cars, I feel that they could have done better with the air hoses. Let's find a good shot of one. Here you go. You can see right here, just kind of almost like a stub stuck on there. Whereas if you look at the Exact-Rail car, I'm going to uncouple the flat car from here. Hang on a second, please. Get in there. There we go. You can tell there's a nice droop to the air hose. All the bracket and hardware that you would see on the prototype is mounted on there. Not to mention the scale KD coupler really sets it off nicely. But it's just one of those, again, those little details. If you're photographing the end of this car sitting on a siding, to me this is one of those make or break deals as far as realism goes. So anyway, the ends is about the only thing I have against the Intermountain car. On the Exact rails, I'm not a huge fan of the wooden roof walk just because I know they're thicker than the metal ones. I like roof walks to be thin, which is what really bugs me about the Athearn car. But nonetheless, it still is very well done. I'm looking here, make sure I don't miss anything I was going to share with you guys. Also on the Exact rails too, this may just be a little bit of me. I'll look at the underside of this one. The painted trucks, the body matched color of the trucks. I do not care for that. Because if you look at photographs, even trucks that were painted body colors have a darker look to them. You know, the grease, the dirt, and the grime that trucks get on them. That's true across any era of railroading. The Intermountain cars did not have that. I'm going to go back to this other one that's on its side here and show you. As you can see, I went through and I dry brushed, not painted, but dry brushed a boxcar collar onto the side frame, and then weathered on top of that. And I kind of got more of an effect from many of the photographs and books that I've looked at. For example, let's go down at this guy here. I did the same thing to him here behind the switch stand. I feel that just gives a nicer effect. So that's one of my little detail things that I'm kind of peculiar about. So, other than that, these are $35 freight cars, so they're not exactly cheap for your run-of-the-mill box car. They're pretty nice though, and I have no objections to buying them. They do track very well, which is also very important to me. Let's talk about weathering. I have some basic foundations for weathering, and I vary them a little from car to car. One of the cars you see here, an Intermountain car, is in the 1963 paint scheme. Since my layout is set in 1966, I didn't want to weather this car very heavily. Before weathering any piece of rolling stock, I paint some of the details for greater realism. I remove the trucks and paint them in the air hoses grimy black, and I paint the couplers and wheel faces either grimy black or rough brown. I usually vary this over a group of cars to keep things different. If the angle caulk on the air hose isn't silver, then I touch that as well with a little bit of silver. On this particular car, simply all I did was spray on a few coats of very thin grimy black, and that was it. I also coated the underside of the car the heaviest. As I said, this car would only be 3 years old in my layout, so I wanted it to kind of definitely be noticeably cleaner. Now on these other cars, the scheme, as you can tell, is the root of the Hiawatha scheme. This is the scheme that came before the one that you saw in the previous car. These cars obviously are going to be filthier. So again, after painting the details, I get some burnt or dark umber from Woodland Scenics. I have both, and I thin them very much with water. In fact, I keep them all ready to go in a couple of small glass jars. For a moderate weathering job, such as this guy right here, I only put on one or the other. And I just put on one coat, keeping the car sitting upright the entire time. I do the roof, I do the ends, I do the sides. I make sure to cover every spot, every nook and cranny, really work everything in. If the car is going to be more heavily weathered, a real grubby looking car, I put on both collars. Otherwise, it's just one or the other. Again, to keep a little variation going. Some of the cars, if you remember when you saw I had them setting so you can see the undersides, I'll paint the air reservoir, triple valve, and other brake hardware with some polyscale rough brown. And I do kind of a sloppy job. I try not to do a real perfect job. The thing is to make it look like there's some paint coming through the dirt, rust, and grime. These details hang lower, so when you're viewing the car or photographing the car down at track level, these details, I think, just look a little better. It's one of those little things. Sometimes I'll take that same roof brown and dry brush the grab irons, brake hardware on the B end of the car, or even the door hardware, the sliding doors that is. Also, I'll take some light gray primer, and this car right here, I'm going to slide these back. I'll go through and very, very gently hit some of the ribbing on the side, just barely. Enough to bring that out, almost look like a little paint's coming off. We're going to raise the camera here. We're going to take a look down at the roof. I also will go over the roof walk, especially a metal roof walk. Lean in a little more here, guys. You can see this. Kind of hard to see after you get everything blended on. You can kind of see just a little bit of lightness across the raised roof panels. Again, we're just simulating some of the paint coming off. I don't like to use silver. I think that's too bright. I prefer to use kind of a light primer gray, again, the polyscale paint. I'm going to lower the camera back down. Bear with me for a minute, please. There we go, back at track level. That it kind of ends things that I do here at the workbench with dry brushing, anything else. Out in the garage, we fire up the airbrush, and I start with some polyscale earth, again mixed very, very thin. I cannot stress that enough. Mix your paint thin. You want it to, basically if you dip your toothpick in it and wipe it on a paper towel, you want just enough color, just enough to see it. So I take this earth, I'll coat the underside of the car real well, then I set the car upright on my blocks because I have it off the truck, set up on the blocks in my paint booth, and I will spray down along the bottom sides here, down along the bottom sides of the car, same thing on the ends. And I also will hit the truck side frames, which are set up on a jig, much like this barbecue skewer. I just take some of these and put them in holes in a block of wood, and the trucks just kind of press right on the top. Very handy. So after I do that, then I get my rough brown out. Again, I shoot the underside, coating it pretty good. By now, things are getting pretty grubby down there. I then coat the car's roof, sides, and ends. I keep it a little heavier towards the bottom. This color represents the true difference between a very filthy piece of rolling stock and just a normally filthy piece of rolling stock. It's kind of a make or break color. It represents that dirty, rusty effect. So I can sometimes, because I mix the paint so thin, for a heavily weathered car, it wouldn't be unusual to shoot on 8 to 10 coats of this stuff. That's how thin I mix the paint. And that way I can gradually see how things are building up. After I do the roof brown, and by the way, I spray that on the trucks. After I do the roof brown, then I'll mix up a little grimy black, again, very thin, and that's really important with this color. Because all I want the grimy black for is to blend everything together, kind of give an overall layer of grub to the car that kind of unifies all the weathering. I do not shoot the trucks with this, because the trucks were originally coated with grimy black. I don't want to lose any effects that I've put on that. So I said the big thing to remember is keep your weathering thin. That way you can better judge when it's time to stop. Now, I commented about mixing your paint very thin. If you look at the 1963 car, would you believe there's about 4 coats of grimy black all over that car? That's how thin I keep it. But I have a car that looks clean, but doesn't look like a plastic model out of the box. And that is the effect. This guy is pretty heavily weathered here. I wanted him to be that way. Here's one not quite so weathered. You can kind of see the earth down around the bottom here a little better. There's the old Athens car. We'll just kind of ignore it. I'm going to slide the camera over without bumping into anything. Here we go. Here's an exact rail car. Oh, the exact rail has different doors as well than the Intermountains for the most part. Thought I'd share that. So anyway, you can hear, again, you kind of see the earth really kicked up around the sides. This has the painted freight car trucks, and yes, they match the body well. I think that's almost too much of a good thing. But they look pretty good. I'm not going to complain. The detail on them is just, I mean, fabulous. There's no other way to describe it. And here's the other exact rail car. He's, you can tell there's a difference in the weathering there. And that's why with all of my paints, my weathering paints, I don't follow an exact same set standard every time I weather. I'll do a wash with one or the other paint, sometimes with both. And the paints are pretty similar in colors, but there's enough of a difference. This guy got both coats of the Woodland Scenics paint. And just how I weather the car, sometimes I'll really kick the mud up on the sides, sometimes I won't, sometimes I'll just give it an overall dusting. Sometimes I'll have more peeling paint on one car than another one. I just try and vary it. Highlight details more on another one. Again, you have to vary it up. That's what makes it more believable, in my opinion, and more interesting. So that's pretty much it. Again, keep your paint thin. Try to mix things up. Don't paint all your wheel faces rough brown. Paint a few of them grimy black. If you got a really new car, paint them engine black even. Again, you got to keep things mixed up. So that's pretty much it. That's it for this month. We'll have one for next month, the final vlog of the year. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm floating around a couple of ideas, so I definitely will have something. I just haven't decided yet. But I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I really appreciate you watching, you guys commenting and giving suggestions and compliments as well. It's really nice to be a part of this community. So if you have any questions or anything, please drop me a line. Feel free to ask, or if you have some ideas for some future blogs. Other than that, have a happy Thanksgiving. Take care, guys.